You know, there is a very specific kind of silence that happens when a room full of wealthy people decides that someone doesn't belong. It's not a quiet silence. It's loud. It rings in your ears like a high-pitched frequency that only you can hear. I felt that silence wash over me in the grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton in Chicago last Tuesday. It was the kind of moment that usually makes you want to shrink until you disappear into the floorboards. But I didn't shrink. I stood tall, because the man looking down his nose at me, a man wearing a tuxedo that cost more than my first car, had absolutely no idea that the nobody he was sneering at was about to own him. Let me take you back to the beginning, because to understand the look on Gavin Sterling's face when his world collapsed, you have to understand the woman he tried to humiliate. My name is Dr. Elena Ross. If you saw me on the street, you wouldn't look twice. I drive a 5-year-old Volvo. I shop at Target. I wear a watch that belonged to my grandmother, a nurse who worked double shifts for 40 years just to keep the lights on. It's scratched, it ticks a little too loud, and it's worth about $15 at a pawn shop. But to me, it's priceless. It reminds me of where I came from, and more importantly, it reminds me of what real work looks like. But here is the part that isn't visible on the surface. I run Ross Horizon Group. We are a private equity firm that specializes in finding broken companies with toxic leadership but good bones, and fixing them. We don't make noise. We don't do press releases. We move in silence. And for the last 6 months, my target had been Sterling Dynamics, a massive aerospace tech firm run by Gavin Sterling. Gavin is, well, he's a character. He's the kind of CEO who puts his face on every billboard, parks his Ferrari in the handicap spot because it's closer to the door, and thinks diversity is a wooden ship from the Civil War era. He inherited the company from his father and treated it like his personal piggy bank. But the numbers didn't lie. Sterling Dynamics was bleeding cash, morale was in the toilet, and the stock price was teetering on the edge of a cliff. I saw an opportunity, not just to make money, but to clean house. By 4 p.m. on the day of the gala, I had acquired 58% of the voting stock through various shell companies. It was done. Signed, sealed, delivered. Technically, I was already his boss. But I didn't want to just walk in and fire him. I wanted to know who I was firing. I wanted to see with my own eyes how he treated a human being he thought had zero power. So I devised a test. I put away my tailored suits. I left my diamond studs in the safe. I put on a simple beige cardigan I've had since college. There's a little fray on the left cuff if you look closely, and a pair of sensible slacks. I pulled my hair back into a bun and walked out of my hotel room. My husband Marcus, a man who has the patience of a saint and the protective streak of a grizzly bear, looked at me and sighed. "You're going into the lion's den dressed like a librarian," he said, shaking his head. "He's going to eat you alive, El." "Let him try," I said, fastening my grandmother's watch. "I want to see if he chokes on the bones." I took a cab to the Ritz, not a limo, a cab. When I got to the registration desk, the young woman there, her name tag said Tiffany, looked me up and down like I was a stain on the carpet. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice dripping with that special kind of customer service ice. "I'm here for the Sterling Gala," I said politely. "Name's Elena Ross." She typed on her computer for a solid minute, frowning. I knew my name was there. I was the majority shareholder, for God's sake. But there was no VIP flag next to it because I had explicitly asked for it to be removed. "I see your name," she said, sounding disappointed. "Here is your badge." It was a generic white sticker. Not the laminated gold embossed lanyards the other guests were wearing, just a sticker. It basically screamed, "I am unimportant." I walked into the ballroom. It was a sea of excess. Ice sculptures, a chocolate fountain the size of a small car. Men in bespoke suits clapping each other on the back, women in gowns that sparkled under the chandeliers. And there, in the center of it all, holding court, was Gavin Sterling. He looked exactly like his photos, only redder. He was laughing at his own joke, holding a glass of scotch like a scepter. I watched him for 20 minutes. I watched a waiter accidentally bump his elbow, and Gavin turned around and, "What's your name?" I asked. "Leo," he said. "Leo Davis." "Leo," I said, reaching into my purse and pulling out a business card. It wasn't the Ross Horizon card. It was my personal line. "Don't delete that, and don't post it yet. Just ... Keep it safe. Can you do that for me?" He looked at the card, then at me. He saw something in my face. Maybe it was the calm. Maybe it was the fact that I wasn't falling apart. He nodded. "Yes, ma'am." "I got you." I went back to the hotel. Marcus was waiting. He took one look at my face and poured me a glass of wine. "Bad?" he asked. "Worse," I said, kicking off my flats. "He called security. He called me the help. He humiliated me in front of the entire industry." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Do you want me to go down there?" "No," I smiled, and for the first time that night, it was a genuine smile. Because the paperwork went through at 5 p.m. I got the confirmation email in the cab. "I own 58% of Sterling Dynamics, Marcus. I own the chair he sits in. I own the desk he puts his feet on. I own the building he's standing in right now." I walked to the window and looked out at the Chicago skyline. Somewhere out there, Gavin, Sterling was probably toasting to his own greatness, laughing about the woman in the beige sweater he'd thrown out like trash. He was sleeping the sleep of the arrogant and the ignorant. "Set the alarm for 6 a.m., I told Marcus. "I have a board meeting to crash." The next morning, the city was gray and rainy, the kind of weather that matches a funeral. I didn't wear the cardigan. I put on my armor. A custom-tailored navy suit, Italian leather heels that clicked with authority on the pavement, and my grandmother's watch. Always the watch. I walked into the Sterling Dynamics headquarters at 8:55 a.m., the security guard at the front, desk a different one from the night before, started to stand up to ask for ID. Then he stopped. He looked at the way I walked. He looked at the team of 4 lawyers flanking me like a phalanx. He sat back down and let us pass. Power recognizes power. We took the elevator to the 40th floor. The executive suite. It was quiet. The receptionist looked up, startled. "Can I help you?" she squeaked. "I'm here for the 9 a.m. board meeting," I said, not breaking stride. I don't have you on the list. Mr. Sterling is already in there. You can't just..." I pushed open the double mahogany doors. The room froze. It was a classic boardroom. Long oak table, leather chairs, view of the lake. The entire board of directors was there. 12 old white men and 1 woman, Gavin's wife, Victoria, who sat at the far end looking miserable. And at the head of the table, leaning back in his chair, laughing at something the CFO had said, was Gavin Sterling. He stopped laughing when he saw me. He blinked. He didn't recognize me at first. The suit, the hair, the confidence, it threw him off, but then he saw the face. "You," he said, standing up. "You have got to be kidding me. How did you get past security? Is this a joke? Did you come back to beg for a job cleaning the toilets?" He looked around at the board members, exasperated. "This is the woman I told you about, the one who crashed the gala. Someone call the police." "Sit down, Gavin," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it filled the room. "Excuse me?" He slammed his hand on the table. "You don't tell me what to do. This is my company. Get out before I have you thrown out a window." "It's not your company," I said, walking toward the head of the table. "Not anymore." I motioned to my lead lawyer, David. David slid a thick stack of documents across the polished oak. They slid perfectly, stopping right in front of Gavin's scotch glass from the night before. "What is this?" Gavin sneered. picking up the top sheet. "That," I said, "is the SEC filing confirming the transfer of majority ownership of Sterling Dynamics to Ross Horizon Group. As of midnight last night, I own 58% of the outstanding shares. I am the majority shareholder. I am the chairman of the board." I stopped right in front of him. "And you are sitting in my chair." Gavin's face went through a spectrum of colors I didn't know existed. Pale, then red, then a sickly shade of purple. He looked at the paper. He looked at his CFO. "Bob," Gavin rasped. "Bob, what is she talking about?" Bob, the CFO, was furiously typing on his laptop. He stopped. He looked up, his face ashen. "Gavin ... the transfer. It cleared. It's real. The shell companies. They all consolidated under her name. She owns it. She owns it all." The silence in the room was heavier than the silence at the gala. It was the sound of a guillotine blade hanging in the air. This is a hostile takeover," Gavin stammered, sweat breaking out on his forehead. "You can't do this. I'll sue. I'll tie this up in court for years." "You can try," I said calmly. "But while you're doing that, you might want to check your email. And your Twitter feed." "Why?" he whispered. "Because Leo posted the video," I said. "Because Leo posted the video." Those words hung in the air like smoke. Gavin blinked, confusion warring with the rising panic in his chest. "Who is Leo? What video?" I didn't answer him. I just pulled a remote from my pocket and pointed it at the massive 80-inch screen mounted on the boardroom wall. "Let's watch together, shall we?" I pressed play. The audio was crisp, crystal clear. It cut through the boardroom like a knife. "I don't shake hands with the help." Gavin's voice boomed from the speakers. On the screen, there he was, in high definition, sneering down at me. The camera zoomed in on his face, the arrogance, the cruelty. Then it panned to me, standing there in my beige cardigan, hand extended, dignity intact. Security. Who was watching the door? "We have a stray in here," the board members gasped. One of the older men covered his mouth. Victoria, Gavin's wife, closed her eyes and turned her head away. "People like you always looking for a handout, dragging this country down." The video ended with the security guards grabbing my arms. The screen went black. For 10 seconds, nobody breathed. The only sound was the hum of the projector cooling down. "That video," I said, turning to face the room, "went live 30 minutes ago. It currently has 2 million views. It's trending on Twitter, TikTok, and LinkedIn. Sterling Dynamics is the #1 search term on Google right now, and not because of your thruster technology." I looked at Bob, the CFO. "Bob, check the stock price." Bob's hands were shaking so bad he could barely hit the keys. Oh God. It's down 12%. No, 14. It's in freefall. Trading might be halted." Gavin collapsed back into his chair, my chair. He looked like he had been punched in the gut. I was drunk. It was a party. It was out of context. "Context?" I asked, walking around the table. "The context is that you looked at a human being, black woman, and decided based solely on her appearance that she was beneath you. You decided she was the help. You decided she was a stray." I stopped behind Victoria's chair. "But this isn't just about last night, is it? See, when I look into a company, I don't just look at the P&L sheets. I look at the culture. I look at the skeletons." I signaled David again. He opened his briefcase and began passing out thick bound dossiers to every board member. "What you have in front of you," I announced, "is a summary of 19 separate HR complaints filed against Gavin Sterling over the last 10 years. 19. Racial discrimination, sexual harassment, wrongful termination. And here is the kicker. Every single one of them was settled out of court using company funds. hidden in the miscellaneous operational expenses budget. I looked at Gavin. He was staring at the table, his breathing shallow. You stole $4 million from this company to pay people to stay quiet about your abuse, I said. That's embezzlement. That's fraud. And that is a prison sentence. Gavin looked up, his eyes wild. You can't prove that. Those were settlements, standard practice. Not when you falsify the accounting records, I corrected. We have the emails, Gavin. We have the directives you sent to HR to bury the files. We have it all. I turned to the board. They were reading the dossiers, their faces pale. They knew what this meant. If they protected him now, they were complicit. They would go down with the ship. Now, I said, resting my hands on the back of the empty chair at the head of the table, I think we need to have a vote. I am making a motion to remove Gavin Sterling as CEO, effective immediately for cause gross misconduct, embezzlement, and breach of fiduciary duty. I second the motion, a voice said. Gavin whipped his head around. It was Victoria, his wife. Victoria, he whispered. What are you doing? Victoria stood up. She was shaking, but her voice was clear. I have defended you for 20 years, Gavin. I told myself it was just stress. I told myself you were just old school. But I watched that video. I watched you treat that woman like dirt. And I realized that's how you treat everyone. That's how you treat me. She looked him in the eye. I vote to remove. I vote to remove, said Bob, the CFO. Remove, said the man to his left. Remove, remove. The voices cascaded around the table like dominoes falling, unanimous. It seems you're out, Gavin, I said. Gavin stood up. He tried to muster some of that old bluster, some of that arrogance that had